What is the true cost of renewable energy? But yet, more importantly, what is the impact on the consumers and the electrical bills? That on the Energy Newsbeat Daily Standup. The true cost of renewable energy and the impact on consumers' electrical bills. But what does the EU, UK, and ERCOT all have in common? This is a story out of the Energy Newsbeat Substack. In the global race toward net zero emissions, renewable energy sources like wind and solar are often touted as the affordable path to a sustainable future. Governments, including those in the EU, the United Kingdom, and the United States, have implemented big ambitions, but rut-row net zero policies in the EU and UK. Let's talk about promises versus reality. The targets for 42.5% renewable energy in the overall mix by 2030 and significant reductions in greenhouse gases ain't going to happen. What happens is net zero equals deindustrialization. Just ask Germany, just ask New York, just ask New Jersey, California. But here's where it gets dicey. In this article on Substack, I wrote this part reviewing Dieter Helm's analysis, systems cost, and the renewables. This was an outstanding article that I went and analyzed it and took a summary. Helm argues that while the levelized cost, the LCOE for wind and solar has dropped, this metric ignores broader system costs, intermittency, the fact that renewables generate only when the wind blows or the sun shines. But yet what he missed was what Meredith Angwin, from the author of Shorting the Grid, talked to me about a while ago. And I brought up that point. Let's take ERCOT for an example. ERCOT is about 90 gigawatts that they need in order to supply power on the grid. That 90 gigawatts, though, they'd have 180 gigawatts. Of that 180 gigawatts, they could do with a lot less using the old standard of coal, natural gas, and nuclear, of just adding 20% just in case you had an outage, if you needed downtime to repair maintenance. But now when you take a look at 100 and 200% more power, that cost is never calculated into the consumer price front, and neither is the land reclamation, and that is not being talked about, and it was missed in his article. That's why I added it into my article here on this. So go to theenergynewsbeat.substack.com and check it out. Like, subscribe, and give us a support there. Let's go to the next story. Climate change supporters and their media try to hit net zero by 2050, but at what cost? This is from Doug Sheridan on LinkedIn. I highly recommend that you check him out. This is his article. He says, we support more baseload nuclear and natural gas generation, and as geothermal and hydro in lieu of coal, solar, and wind. Streamline permitting, build more load gas-fired generation to handle daily and seasonal variability, while prioritizing reductions in methane emissions that might undermine gas environmental benefits, wring out grid inefficiencies. Well said. EVs should be optional, not mandated. So to overload grids or force EVs on those who are not a good fit, like in the Midwest, if you've got to drive 600 miles between your two houses, kind of like somebody I know, you really need to double check and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe an EV is not exactly going to meet that bid. Carbon tax should replace and eliminate all national energy subsidies mandates. Nations may consider the impact of a carbon tax on trade and competitiveness and explore border adjustments. I disagree on that. And I think that there needs to be something in the carbon adjustment border mechanisms are absolutely a graft and a scam. Nobody has done them right in the past, and all they do is take that money and give it to their friends' companies and then get a kickback. The world is not ready for those kind of funds. All right, let's go to the next one. Why is model-based oil forecast keep missing the mark? This is an outstanding story from oilprice.com, Irina Slav. I absolutely love Irina Slav and her sense of humor. Her knowledge is top notch. Let's go through the three top bullet points and then we'll go through the story. Many oil price forecasts, particularly those from the International Energy Agency and net zero organizations, consistently predict a glut in ignoring contradictory data or using flawed computer models. Yeah, we've been saying that for quite a while. Despite these forecasts, global oil demand continues to grow. Sorry about that. Prices frequently jump in response to threats on supply, indicating a tighter market than models suggest. Listen to this. Reliable indicators of oil demand and supply are found in physical market data, which often leads to forecasting bodies to reverse their projections and call for more oil investments. I want to give Chris Wright a shout out at the Department of Energy and the EIA in the United States. They have gotten better at not politicizing their data, unlike the foreign, the international, or the IEA is about as political as you possibly can get. Brent crude is trading about $67 a barrel, and WTI, West Texas Intermediate, is about 65. Not because the world's consuming less oil than 3 years ago when crude shot up over the $100. Oil demand has grown steadily since the 2020 slump caused by the pandemic. The only reason these forecasters, and most notably the IEA, are predicting a glut is because that is what fits their models. And she is spot on. Irina hit it out of the park because that's what I've been saying. We need trillions of dollars just to invest in meeting normal decline curves. That has not been happening. So if we sit back and take a look at whether or not it's just normal decline curves, that means demand has got to be there. And another major thing is what happens if the Russian sanctions are lifted? If Zelensky can actually understand that he needs to be the big boy in the room, get a new tailor and not from some child's wardrobe like he showed up at the White House, and actually end the war, give Russia the Crimea that these Russian bases have been at for 1 billion years, and then go ahead and then allocate that out there. Zelensky needs to end the war. If Russia ends the war and sanctions are lifted, prices are going to go up because Russia is pretty well maxed out on their EMP company's ability to increase their production. They've been able to avoid sanctions by the use of the dark fleet. They have a ballpark number of 700 tankers, and they are quite capable of keeping their oil flowing. However, that being said, they have a limited supply unless American companies could help them out and get going again. And then I think energy as an export, as a service, would help Secretary Chris Wright be energy dominant by exporting services. But anyway, she brings up some other great points. Last week, prices tanked after the meeting between the presidents of Russia and the United States as I was going in. Then the EU and Zelensky took the meeting home, and the prospects of peace began to evaporate, only to be replaced by the prospect of more sanctions on Moscow. Irina has coined the phrase, sanctions don't work as intended, and they will still mean that Russia will be able to sell all he can produce, but he's been limited in putting money back into production because he's funding the war. So he's not capable of putting out a lot and flooding the market as people are saying, oh, Russia's going to flood the market. Not going to happen. Anyway, outstanding job, Irina Slav over at oilprice.com. Also, subscribe to Irina Slav on her Substack as well, too. IEA, the next story, the IEA expects record U.S. natural gas consumption in 2025. This is from Chris Wright. Speaking of Chris Wright and the Department of Energy, I really like their reports because they have been spot on since he's gotten in there and he's really trying to hit it out. Listen to this. Natural gas consumption was high in the beginning of the year, driving our forecast. January consumption was a record 126.8 BCF, more than 5% in the record set in January 2024. Holy smokes, Batman. They estimate that the U.S. natural gas consumption decreased this spring and summer compared to consumption over the same time last year in the power sector, but that is going to be picked back up as more demand is rolling through. Let's go through this last story here. Before I do that, I want to give a shout out to Reese Energy Consulting. Please go to reeseenergyconsulting.com and check them out. If you're in the midstream space, if you're in the natural gas space and you want to get your molecules to Poland, to Germany, if you want to get them and export them, make sure you get paid for every single molecule. If you're in AI and you're in data center and you need natural gas, get a hold of Reese Energy Consulting. Also, go to investinoil.energynewsbeat.co and check or .com. Go to investinoil.energynewsbeat.com and check out. And if you are got a tax burden, if you're in New York, New Jersey, California, and you're a little worried about taxes, give us a call. There's a calculator there for you, and say, hey, wait a minute, I need to reduce my taxes and tax burden, and check that out. It's a pretty cool little tool. Let's go to the last story here for the day. BlackRock gas deal shores up Aramco's financial firepower. This is a pretty cool story and a strategic move. Saudi Aramco's commitment to bolstering its balance sheet while expanding natural gas operations. The oil giant has inked, listen to this, $1 billion lease and leaseback agreement with BlackRock Global Infrastructure Partners, GIP. If it was me, it'd probably be called GIMP, but it's called GIP, GIP, Global Infrastructure Partners. This deal, announced on August 14th, 2025, involves the Jafurah gas processing facilities and is poised to inject significant capital into Aramco's coffers. And it's because they still owe a lot of money to the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And this is one way for them. Michael and I have talked about this on the show, that if this is a way for them to actually fund a lot of that and yet get it in there and be financially, fiscally responsible. So hats off to Saudi Aramco. And again, that's the difference between having oil and gas as a general rule in the United States and in Saudi Arabia, are giving back to their investors, not like the wind, solar, and hydrogen. I wrote that story about that just recently as well. If you want money, take a look at going into oil and gas and do it responsibly. Anyway, with that, like, subscribe, go to theenergynewsbeat.substack.com or go to energynewsbeat.co or energynewsbeat.com. Look forward to hearing from you all soon. Have an absolutely wonderful day. Thanks.